Recording. Yay. And I'm going to go ahead and broadcast. Hi, everyone. This is Maggie Ostara, and I'm delighted to be welcoming you here to Resiliency by Design. It is my weekly teaching for my community. I'm delighted to be able to share this time with you. We'll see. We just started right on time, so I imagine you'll all be joining shortly. And let's all take a big breath. Yeah, because our topic today inside of, so this is part of the Sovereignty by Design Facebook group. So if you're there on Facebook, either watching now or watching later, I welcome you to Sovereignty by Design. And this particular series right now is Resiliency by Design, which I created in response to the COVID-19 pandemic that we are all navigating to the best of our ability at this time. And so the Resiliency by Design series has been looking at different aspects of the human design chart and how it can help reveal places in our own being that can help us in this time of having to navigate something that none of us have been through before. And so we're learning how to be here, sheltering in place. I know this is week 10 for me and my non-binary teenager together. Friday will be 10 weeks total that we've been sheltering in place. And we don't really have an end in sight at this point. We may towards, I don't know. I imagine that our local authorities will be looking again in early June or towards the end of May. But the last time that they sent out the health order, it was with an indeterminate end. And so we'll just have to see how this goes. And so we're navigating this, and there's a lot that goes on inside of us when we're meeting a huge change like this, to whatever degree you may be experiencing it as a challenge, or whether or not it's actually provided you with a lot more opportunity. Because the truth is there's been the whole gamut of how people have been responding to what's going on. Some people actually have more business than ever. And others have lost their jobs and have lost their business. Some haven't been able to see their families. Some are kind of cooped up with their families. And so it's, really all kinds of different things are going on. So I wanted to offer what I can from a human design perspective, and also from my decades of experience really doing spiritual healing and mentoring and personal growth work, to help us to be able to meet the challenges that we have in life and to develop out of that stronger than ever before. So, okay, so Barbara, hi. Okay, so we've got Barbara is there. She's saying hello from Facebook. All right. And those of you who are coming online here via Zoom, please do go ahead and just say hello in the chat. I didn't send out a reminder today, so it'll be interesting to see who comes and doesn't come today if I didn't send out a reminder. All right. So today we are we're going to talk about fear today, and I think fear is a huge. I don't even want to call it an issue. I want to call it an aspect of our reality. Hi, Carolyn. Hi, Katayun. Hi, Megumi. Welcome. Go ahead and keep just writing in. And one of the things I'm going to ask you a little bit later today is to share about what kind of fear you might have going on for you, if you can identify some of the qualities. And I'm going to run through the qualities of the fear in the spleen gates. And I want you to see if you're like, oh, okay, this one is the one that I'm really relating to, because then you'll have a way to work with it more effectively. But then I also want to just give you an outline of the spleen in general, both its awakened aspects or its superpowers, if you will, and also some of its either shadow aspects or its challenges. Um, and so that you can start to understand yourself and identify yourself in relation to the spleen. Okay, so let me just see. I think, yeah, there's a couple things, announcements that I want to just make before I dive into the teaching part. So one is that my course, Awakening Your Superpowers, Introducing Human Design, is a course that it's not currently available. I did teach it live, it was great. And I am going to be making it available so that you can engage with it at any time as an evergreen program. And I will be providing live Q&A to go with that. But it means that you'll be able to engage with it, and then you can work on it at your own pace, because all of the lessons are video lessons, also available in audio, and the PowerPoints, and then the worksheets, so you can work through it at your own pace. And some of the material that I've been sharing in these series has come out of that class. So for example, there's a whole class on the motors in the chart. We talked about the will center last time, and that's one of the motors in the chart. We're talking today about the spleen center, which is one of the centers that's not a motor. So there's a class on the non-motorized centers. And then really all of the key ingredients that you need to know to be able to understand what's going on in the human design chart. And so that class I'm aiming for it to be available in June. I need to transform it over into an evergreen format, and I'll be letting you know when that becomes available again. But it was a great class, and people really enjoyed it, got a lot out of it. And so I want to make it available to you. Then the other piece is that it occurred to me actually today when I was thinking about fear, and that it might be beneficial to you, and I will also offer this to my online community via Facebook and via my emails, to have a COVID coaching special. I don't usually operate this way. I usually work with people in 6-month ongoing programs, whether that's the Becoming Sovereign program or the Living Your Design program. But I thought maybe just as a support for you, without necessarily wanting to go through a life transformative experience like that that's 6 months long, to provide a coaching package of 3 coaching sessions to you. And that can include more human design. It can also just include diving into whatever you're experiencing now, getting some support to be able to turn any of the challenges that you have into opportunities, and to be able to identify what you might experience as liabilities in how you operate in the world, and turn them into allies for you, which is one of the things that human design is great. And to get you really in touch with your superpowers, so that you can feel more strong and stable as you're moving forward. So I don't have a web page or anything for that, but if that's something that interests you, please just email me, and we can chat about it. Okay. All right. So those are a couple of announcements. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started with our slides today. All right. So hold on while I do this. Go ahead. There's more of you here that have been coming online. So go ahead and just say hi, pop your name and where you're from in the chat. Share screen. Here we go. Okay, so today's class is Resiliency by Design in the Spleen Center. And this is part of the Sovereignty by Human Design, which is the name of our Facebook group. And if you're not a member of the Facebook group, I really encourage you to, if you're on Facebook, if you utilize it, I do encourage you to go ahead and join us there. And we're starting to get the conversations going there. So this is the Human Design Mandala. I always like to show it because it is so beautiful, and it can give you a sense of where the different aspects of the chart and human design come from. I also want to let you know that I did post an image of the mandala in the Facebook group. So I know a couple of you were asking for that. So if you are interested for that, make sure you're in the Facebook group and you can get it there. If you do want more information, you can join my Ostara Human Design membership site. And I will be popping these URLs into the chat. But inside of the membership site, you'll find additional videos and trainings that are, it's free. It's just a way for me to help you get to understand and deepen your knowledge of human design. I am at a point in my love affair with human design that I want everyone to get to know it and to get to know their own design and to get to understand human design. So I am making as much information available to you as I can. If you are interested in having an introductory reading with me, these are half an hour. I'm only making them available to you in the Facebook group, and then those of you who are coming on to these teachings. They're $147. We can do a lot in 30 minutes. The full foundational readings are $400, and they're 90 minutes plus a half-hour follow-up, and so those really take a deep dive. So those are available to you also, but if you do just want to have, you know, an intro reading, you know, please do just, you know, email me or just use this URL here, and that'll just take you to an order form, and you can go ahead and get that for you. All right, so let's dive into the Spleen Center. So the Spleen Center is not a motor, okay? Which means it doesn't have the kind of power that that one of the motors does. It just as a review, the sacral here it's red when it's defined, and it's what, if you have it defined, it makes you a generator, either a pure generator or a manifesting generator. It's the most powerful motor in the chart. Then we have the will center, which we talked about last time. We have the emotional solar plexus, and then we have the root. So these are the four motors, and they're exactly what it sounds like. They're engines, if you will. So the spleen doesn't have that kind of power. It's not that kind of energy center that you can use to kind of create and manifest in your life. The spleen center is more associated with instinct and with intuition. And so with the instinct is where we get the fear. It's kind of like related to survival, the survival instinct, which often does have a quality of fear in it. It's like what we think of as that fight or flight energy. And that energy is very beneficial when we are actually in a life-threatening situation. So, for example, if you are, you know, somebody swerves in front of you while you're driving down the freeway, right? That your adrenaline will come up. You'll go into that overdrive mode, and you will, because you have the fear there, and that will enable you, actually, your reflexes get really fast and enable you to move out of the way of that car, okay? Or to jam on the brakes or whatever is most appropriate in that moment. This is also the energy that, you know, if the proverbial mom who lifts the car off of her kid, right, is that kind of energy. So it's in that energy in the short term, right? I mean, it's not sustainable, obviously, but it is based in fear. Okay, it is based in a kind of oh no, oh shit, I might die. You know, my child might die, something like that. It comes from those days when we needed to run from predators. You know, or we were, you know, in a boat on the ocean and we had to figure out how to deal with that, or going, you know, going down through a river and all of a sudden you're in rapids. I mean, that's where that energy comes from. And it's very effective. It's very important that we have it. And it's also that kind of instinctual intuition, like where, like, let's say, for example, you're crossing a street and, you know, you have looked both ways and nothing was coming your way, but you kind of feel something in the back and you turn around and actually, you know, someone on a motorcycle is coming at you, right? It's that instinctual intuition. So it has a very vital role. The challenge is if it's active in your life in a way that's not helpful. So, for example, one of the things that I think is happening for a lot of people is that there's the fear of survival is getting activated in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic that we're in right now. So, you might be sheltering in place at home. No one in your immediate environment has got this virus, and yet you're feeling that you're in a life-threatening situation, and you're acting like you're in a life-threatening situation when actually you're not, right? But you think you might be because, yes, there are people who have died from this virus. And so that fear can get generated inside of you, and you can be running that fear when actually there isn't anything immediately in your environment that is creating a life-threatening situation. So just take a moment and check in for yourself. Have you been running that at all? Have you been worried that there's this, that you're going to die, or that someone you love is going to die? Again, this person is well, they're sheltering at home. There's no reason to believe that they're actually going to even be sick. And yet you're afraid, and you're running that fear about you or that other person dying. So this is where that energy becomes unhelpful, because it will drain you for sure over time, because it does pump your adrenaline. And yet there's no action step that you can take in that situation, right? The only action step that you can take is to stay home, right? Or wash your hands compulsively, right? Which isn't necessarily either helpful or good for you. So just think about that. That's very different than someone who has actually gone to the hospital because they can't breathe, and then they feel like they're in a life-threatening situation, right? And it may actually not be life-threatening, but that's a very different situation, right? Where something is present, right? There's a clear and present danger. And if this happens to someone in your family, you have an action step, which is to get that person to a hospital so that they can be treated and taken care of by experts who can do that, right? So again, just making this alive for what's happening for us right now, because that amount of adrenaline that you get, that it gets released in your system, it's there to enable you to take powerful actions, powerful and potentially fast ones that require a lot of strength and really quick reflexes. Okay, so it's designed for that. It's excellent for that. But if you get that energy going and there's no action step to take, then you can really get into some trouble. So I want to just invite you to go ahead and either put in Facebook in the comments or put into the chat if this is resonating for you. Let me see if I can open the chat here. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. I don't want the chat in front of you though. Okay. Yeah. So go ahead. Yeah, and just pop in the chat there. So what might be resonating for you? So Mary says resonates most from gate 48. What is it about the gate 48? Mary, I'm curious that you're thinking about in that regard. I would not have picked the gate 48 for that, so I'm curious about what you're thinking. Okay, so go ahead and just see if you can feel of what the what is going on for you. And yeah, the 48 is about not knowing enough. Okay, so the 40, it's not really inadequacy so much as it's about not knowing enough, because the 48, the energy of the 48 is about wanting to have real depth of knowledge in something. So it could be, yeah, it could be inadequacy, but it's more specifically, yeah, not knowing enough. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's talk about the spleen, and then we'll talk a little bit about the gates. And I do want you to go ahead and pop into the chat and into the Facebook comments. And I'll come back to the Facebook comments when I'm done with the slides, because I can't actually kind of do both. I'll have to figure out how to do this. I'm learning as we go along, okay? I don't have a fear of not knowing enough, even though I have the 48. All right, let us look here. Okay, so the defined spleen center has a, so let me just say again, for those of you who may not have heard me talk about this before, everyone has all of the energies in the chart, okay? Whether you're defined or undefined, you still have all the energies in the chart. And even as I've put together these pieces about the characteristics that tend to go with the defined spleen or the open spleen, my experience of talking to people is that it may not be, you may identify with the opposite. Like if you have a defined spleen, you may identify with more of the open. If you have an open, you may identify more with the defined. It's really not so prescriptive as you might think. Okay, so just a few characteristics of the defined spleen. Tends to have a strong immune system, can have strong intuition and act spontaneously if this, well, especially if the spleen's authority. And then has a sense of well-being, because the spleen, the defined spleen in the healthy person, the person who's not ruled by fear, it is a really feel-good energy. It's like it feels good to the person who has it. It feels good to other people. It's like a sense of well-being. And so it can be very attractive to the open spleen. And people who have this in the awakened aspect can master the instinctual fear and create a strong sense of security. So that's really what we always want, is we want to be able to master our instinctual fear and not have it be running us, like I was just talking about. Some of the challenges of the defined spleen is that you can overdo and weaken the immune system. Now, obviously that has to do with how else you're defined, whether or not you're, you have the motors defined or not, or if you're a generator or not. But they can also be controlled by instinctual fear. Okay, so this is kind of the, the two sides of the coin, right? And then the defined spleen can, if it's been either has a lot of the logic circuit and the circuitry, or has been trained to be very logical, can override its intuition, can distrust it, which is really unfortunate, because intuition is such a powerful and helpful source that we have. And when you're able to master that instinctual fear in the spleen, then you can have very, very powerful intuition. Okay, so for the open spleen center, some of the awakened aspects are having a sensitive immune system that can lead to a deep knowing of the body's needs. So, people who have an open spleen they tend to be a little more, well, delicate is quite the right word, but I'll just use that word, just in terms of their health. So they have to take better care of themselves, right? They have this sensitive immune system. But that also means that they can, if they're paying attention, they can feel what their body needs, right? And they can be like, oh, yeah, taking a walk in the rain is totally fine. It's raining outside right now. Well, yeah, it's totally fine. Or they may like, no, walk in the rain, not right today, just as an example. Can do well with holistic healing methods and can shift health issues before they become serious, because they have that sensitivity to what's going on inside of their body. And whereas the defined spleen sometimes can get really sick because they have a strong immune system, and so they're not paying attention. And sometimes they'll do better with allopathic medicine because they've kind of run themselves to the point where they're in a kind of an intense state, and they really need stronger medicine. Whereas with the open spleen, maybe not so much. And then for regarding fear and intuition, is that the open spleen, remember, is going to experience the energy of the spleen, but it's going to be more fluid, right? It's going to be more fluid. It's going to come and go. And they're going to experience it sometimes and not others, depending on who they're around. And so this person can feel their intuition. Sometimes they can also feel fear. But when you have experienced it many, many different ways, like from different people who have defined spleens, maybe some people are more radiating fear, others are more radiating that intuitive well-being, sense of well-being, then with the open spleen, if you have fear arises, it's easier to transmit that fear into some kind of inspired action. And then to be able to open up the intuition again. And intuition resides in a number of different places in the chart. It's not just in the 57 in the spleen, which is where kind of in more traditional human design is what is thought of as that way. But really, I mean, it's in many different places in the chart. And so with the open spleen, when you've had the chance to experience the spleen in many different ways, you have more command over deciding how you're going to experience it and how you're going to work with it. Some of the challenges for the open spleen is that a person like this can get seriously sick if they're not paying attention to their body's messages and needs, because they do have a more sensitive immune system. Can hold on to things longer than it should. You'd be afraid of letting go, okay? It can be holding on, including emotions and beliefs, and can be imprinted with the survival fears of the primary caregivers. Now, let me just unpack that for a second. So in the places that are open in our chart, which are white in our chart, that's where we pick up energy and amplify it from the people who are around us. And we have been influenced the most by the people we grew up around, the people that we spent the most time around, whether that's a mom, a dad, two moms, two dads, a grandmother, an aunt, you know, someone else, and siblings, okay? And so we tend to get imprinted by the energies of those people. So if you were around someone who ran that kind of instinctual fear a lot while you were growing up, you could very well be imprinted by that. It's really not your energy. And if you have an open spleen, you can release it and you can let it go. But it is something that it's good to be aware of, because in truth, that energy isn't even yours. Okay. And then can also hold on to people with defined spleens as they give them a sense of strength and well-being. So if you have an open spleen, let's say you did run with people who had a fear, you know, instinctual fear, and you got imprinted by that. If you come around somebody who's mastered that instinctual fear and has that defined spleen, you can hold on to that person, because their sense of well-being can be really stabilizing for you, giving you strength, but it's not yours. So you want to be able to have that as something that's available to you that you can utilize, but not hold on to them for too long. You know, a lot of times this kind of thing is pretty subconscious. We're not even aware of it, but it definitely can happen. Okay. All right. So these are the different gates of the spleen, and I do not have time today to go through all of the different gates. There's a lot of them. But I wanted to just throw these out and tell you basically what type of fear is associated with them. And then you can see if you resonate with that. And if you want to, next week, I mean, maybe next week and the week after, I could break these down and do a teaching on like 3 and then 4 of them, something like that. So maybe you could just let me know if that's something you'd be interested in the chat, because we could go deeper into them. So the gate 48, which Mary was mentioning before, is called depth, or the well. And this is a beautiful gate, okay? This gate is all about research and wanting to know everything about something you get involved in, right? Everything that you get interested in. So the shadow aspect of it, which is the fear of not knowing enough. And what tends to happen for this person is that they want to keep researching, keep learning, keep getting more and more knowledge before they take action. So check that out for yourself. The gate 57, another beautiful energy. It's instinctive intuition. Um, the shadow side of this is the fear of the future. And so the 57 is kind of known as the gate of intuition, and it is a beautiful gate of intuition. But you have to be able to really master that instinctual fear in order to be able to activate the intuition. Otherwise, I don't know if you've ever thought this or had anybody say this to you. They say, I don't know if it's my intuition or if it's my fear, right? Well, so that's kind of the gate 57 energy, okay? And so you want to be able to distinguish between your intuition and your fear. And one thing I'll tell you about intuition is intuition never speaks to you in either blaming or shaming or judgmental ways. Okay, intuition doesn't do that about you or anyone else for that matter. It also doesn't speak in the energy of fear. Okay, true intuition is not fear-based. Um, the only time that it is in the example that I mentioned before, where you're crossing a street, you'd looked both sides, and then you have this kind of intuition that comes over you, and you're like, God, I got to get to the other side of the street. You turn around and there's a motorcycle racing at you. Okay, that is intuitive fear. Okay, but those situations are very, very rare. Generally, that's not the case. The gate 44, known as the gate of energy, is I think of it. It's funny it's called the gate of energy, but I think of it. It's really kind of creating the ground for a new. It's kind of known as the person who sets the stage for sales. You know, they kind of set the stage for something new to occur, for a new step to be taken forward. And the fear of that is the fear of the past. And so the gate 44 really needs to be able to look at how it is holding a piece of the past. Because what we tend to do if we have fear of the past is that we're still connected or attached to some situation that was traumatic or challenging in some way, and then we project it into the future. Okay, and so you want to check that out if that's something that you know that you do, because that's going to disrupt your ability, for one thing, to be able to feel your intuition, but also to be able to be effective in the now, which is what we want to do if we're creating the environment to be able to have someone to say yes, for example, for working with us. The gate 50 is the gate of values or of nurturing. This is a beautiful energy. It's a tribal energy. It's about being able to pass on to the tribe. It's education is here. It's about being able to pass on to the next generation the values, and to be able to nurture young people, or really, I mean, because I think I use this with clients also, you know, people who are we're in that kind of mentoring relationship with, and being able to bring them up. The 50 is, and you might imagine the 50, the fear of this is the fear for others, right? Not being able to do, not that something's going to happen to the others that we have in our charge, as it were. But it's also a fear of our shortcomings. And so, Mary, you may look at the 50 also as a place where what your inadequacy is, because is that an inadequacy of knowledge, which would be more than 48, or is it an adequacy of being able to care for or adequately mentor, for example, in that situation? The gate 32 is known as continuity. And the gate 32, I really think of this as the energy for receiving big ideas. Although it's funny because it's all the way on the spleen, so it's not, you know, it's not in the thinking centers. But it is about having this sense of you know, a big idea, like a big business idea, and then being able to sort through what is this a good one to take action on? Is it the right time? And the fear associated with this one is the fear of failure, right? Because if you can imagine, you've got this big idea, and then it's like, oh, I don't want to act on it, or I don't even want to look at it because I'm afraid that I will fail. The gate 28, my very first class was on the gate 28, so I'm not going to talk about that much. If you're interested in that, you can go and watch the video of that. That's the real fear here of the 28 is victim consciousness, because it's about struggle. So it's the sense of like everything's coming at me, the world is chaotic, I don't have command in my life, and so it's that kind of consciousness. And then the gate 18, another beautiful energy, correction. This is about being able, this is part of the logic circuit, and it's being able to see patterns and being able to correct if there's an issue in the pattern. So it's a really beautiful energy. It can feel harsh if it comes across, if it's not asked for one thing. It can come across as criticism sometimes, but it's a wonderful, it's like people who are editors, have the 18. But the fear of the 18 is not getting it right. Imperfection. This is a perfectionist type of gate, which has a really important place in our world. But it also, if you're afraid it's not going to be perfect or you're not going to get it right, it's going to hold you back. Okay, so we just have a few questions here that I want you to just ask yourself, and then let's just take a dive into this when we go into Q&A, which is, what am I afraid of? And one of the things I said in my little intro video I released yesterday was, it would be pretty odd if you weren't afraid of something right now in the midst of a pandemic. And so what is it? What is it that you're afraid of? And what's underneath that fear? Because a lot of times there's a surface fear, right? And then there's something underneath that. And a lot of times there's even something underneath that, right? So you want to kind of keep asking yourself, okay, what am I aware that I'm afraid of? And then what's underneath that? And then, am I afraid of something else that's different than what I thought I was afraid of? And what am I afraid of? What do I think was going to happen, right? If this were to happen, then what? Like, what would actually happen in my life? Like, what is that underlying fear? The reason that we want to kind of go down through the layers is that very often there's a kind of core old fear based in trauma, either from your life, from your epigenetics, which is actually in your human design, it's your ancestry, or from other lives that you've been in where something happened. And so I think for a lot of us right now in the midst of this pandemic, it's not actually so much the thing that's happening now, it's that it's activating fears that are underneath. Okay, so you want to be looking at that so that you're not trying to address something that's just superficial. You want to try to get deeper down. And this is, this is one of the reasons I do breath work, right? Is it helps us go deeper and deeper and deeper, and then address the deeper fear, and actually typically be able to release the energy of that fear so that it's not running the system anymore. So as you're doing that, you can look into your body, right? How does my body feel, right? Is there a location in my body where I can feel that deeper fear? And what can I do when I feel afraid? So my invitation to you is always to breathe. There's like really great methods of breath work. Those of you who are on my email list, I've given you access to a couple of recordings I have of clarity breath work that you can do. I think Wim Hof has some really great breath work. He has a free app that you can get. He's also on YouTube. I really like his breathing. I'm also doing Kundalini yoga. We do a lot of breathing in Kundalini yoga. I'm doing that with my teacher, Kia Miller, on Glow, GLO.com, which is a membership site for hundreds of yoga classes of every type you can imagine. And there's Kundalini yoga on there. So those are some of the things that I do when I feel fear. Every day I'm doing breath practices that are helping to clear my energy and helping me to feel really getting it in centered in myself. I really invite you to do breathing practices. One of the things you can do right now is you can put your hands in your armpits and just kind of press in with your arms. I learned this from my Kundalini yoga teacher. Just do this and see if you can hold it there for like about 3 minutes and see how you feel, because this activates the parasympathetic nervous system. Also, just long, slow, deep breaths also activates the parasympathetic nervous system. So if you just do this and do 10 long, slow breaths where you count up to 5, up to 10 on the in breath and out, 5 to 10 on the out breath. Do 10 of those and do this for 3 minutes, and it can switch how you feel just like that. And it would be fun for us to share a little bit about what we do to help move our energy when we get afraid. And then just to ask yourself, what do I need when I feel afraid? Like, what do I need? Like, let's say you have the fear of the past, right? What do you need when you have a fear of the past? Is it that you need to revisit that memory and you need to do some writing about it, or you need to do some breathing about it? You need to, kind of hold the little you in your hands or your arms as you're addressing that and just breathing out the trauma that you feel of it. I mean, do you need to have, somebody who can, a coach or a counselor or a therapist who can help you to make peace with that fear of the past? Or if you have a fear of not knowing enough, like, what do you need? If you know that fear is there, what can you do if you're afraid of not knowing enough to be able to convince yourself that you do know enough? One of the assignments that I give clients who have this is I say, I want you to go and make a list of all of the education that you've had in your entire life, including the amount of time that you put in and how much money you invested in it. And just make a list of that. And anytime you start to feel afraid that you don't know enough, just read that list. Because chances are it's many years of education and many tens, even hundreds of thousands of dollars in education. And that can just kind of boop. So just ask yourself what you need. The last thing I want to say about these particular fears, because I want to make sure we have lots of time for some conversation and questions and so on, is that because the fears of the spleen are instinctual fears, they tend to be relatively easy to be able to move through. Okay, they're not grounded in a genuine life-threatening situation most of the time. Okay, there are exceptions to that, but for the most part, they are something that you can move through relatively quickly. So one of the things I would say is, when you're afraid, if they relate to any of these things that we just had here, is see, how can you switch? Okay, how can you switch into the higher aspect of these gates? And I think it might be good to go into them in more depth, but how can you switch into that more awakened aspect of the gates, and also just of the spleen itself? So, you can even say, how can I move into my intuition right now and release myself from fear? So that how, a strategy for you, if you will, about how to deal with those fears as they arise. Okay. Okay, so I'm just gonna go here to get this. I can get this URL. Oh yeah, okay. All right. So I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, and I'm gonna come back, and I'm just going to, let's see here. So there's that URL, and then I'm gonna put in the one for joining the community. Okay, all right, so there you go, if you're interested in either one of those. All right, and I actually want to pop on over here to Facebook. Let's see. All right, so we've got a few comments over here. Yes, Barbara says, I have 5 gates on the spleen. Was in a car accident a couple of years ago and inside yelled, not the ditch, and immediately hit a guardrail that suddenly appeared. That's an awesome story, Barbara. Thank you for sharing that, right? Yeah, it's like your intuition, that instinctual intuition, right, kicked in. I love that. Okay. Dina says, as a projector, I'm not feeling fearful, having a hard time with no connection and no invitation. Okay. Um, I don't know why you said as a projector, you're not feeling fearful, since any type could feel fearful. It would be great maybe to hear a little more from you, Dina, about what you mean about that. And then Courtney says, I feel like the fear has come up from not really the virus, but sometimes from losing my friendships or from decreased income, so I'll starve to death, etc. Definitely had the virus fear at the beginning, yeah. And it comes up more when I read news about new symptoms and new impacts of the virus. Yeah, I totally hear you, Courtney. I think that there, you know, for a lot of us, there was more, there may have been some fear about the virus initially early on. And it's interesting that there's been so many different, I mean, iterations of what the virus, what the symptoms are and what happens and what's really going on. And it's kind of hard to even keep track of it all. But this is an interesting run, right? Where you have decreased income and then you have the fear of starving to death that comes up, right? So starving to death is an instinctual fear. It's a great example of an instinctual fear, right? Chances are, Courtney, something would happen, even if it was like you needed to go to a food bank, that you would not starve to death, right? Or friends would take you in, or yeah, you could email me if you were in version of starving to death. But that's a great example, right? And then we get to go, oh, okay, am I really afraid of starving to death? Is that really what I'm afraid of? Like, what is it like that I'm afraid of? Okay, great. All right, so let's come on over here. All right. Carolyn says, interesting. I have an open spleen center, have been going to naturopaths for 40 years with great success, as I have lots of reactions to prescription drugs. Yeah. And have had to deprogram myself of several fears imprinted by my mom and grandmother, who were my primary caregivers for my first year, as dad was stationed in Korea during the police action. Yes, love to go deep into each of these gates. Great, Carolyn. Yeah. You know, those are really great examples of what I was talking about the spleen. And then she also says, okay, yes, gate 57, which I have personally. So Neptune is in the 57. Let's just all be clear that the planets are in the different gates. So, because I know sometimes we'll say, yeah, you know, my 57 is in Neptune. It's like, no, the Neptune is in 57, just as a point of clarification for everyone. Okay, had to learn to discern the difference between premonition and fear of something happening. Yes, exactly, right? Because you may have premonitions, right? And the thing about Neptune is watery, right? Neptune is watery. It's the subconscious. It's things, you know, wherever your Neptune is can be, it depends on also if it's red or if it's black, right? Because if it's red, it's even more kind of not necessarily something you're super aware of. You can become more aware of it as you study design and you learn these different things. But it can also feel a little amorphous. So that's great, Carolyn, that you've already been learning that. Okay. Mary says, yes, more a save the world thing. Taking on responsibility for what is beyond my control. Yeah, the save the world thing, I mean, you know, Mary, that's just your ego trying to, you know, take over. I know you know that. So it's like, bless that part of you and love that part of you and be like, okay, what's actually appropriate for me? What's actually appropriate for me? And how do I respond? You know, responsibility, of course, it's all about responsibility. And also knowing, just in relation to what you're sharing, Mary, at like, what's our piece of the red thread? I love this thing, and I've been really asking this a lot. I think a lot of us have probably been asking this in this pandemic, like, right? Which is, what is my role? What is my right role in this time? And the red thread, I love this, is something that my intentional creativity mentor, she always opens all of her circles with the red thread ceremony. And the idea here is that every person, we take a red thread and we pass it around, whether it's virtual or whether it's in person. And so we all have our own piece of the red thread, and then we cut, if we're in person, we actually cut our piece of the red thread, right? And then you take your piece of the red thread and you can tie it around your wrist. And the idea is that we're all connected from this red thread, right? And we're all connected as part of this whole, but I'm only responsible for my piece of the red thread, and you're responsible for your piece of the red thread. Because when we take in too big of responsibility, or even too big of a picture, it's really easy to get overwhelmed. And so what we want to do is be able to continue to be effective in our lives. And so we want to be able to have a piece of the red thread that we know is ours, right? And we're doing that piece. Like mine has been, it's really clear. It's like, Maggie, do these teachings, help people in this way with human design, and then, keep writing your book. It's like very clear. And I'm like, shouldn't I do other? And actually the coaching package, the idea of COVID coaching package came in, because I was like, I don't really want a lot more long-term clients. I'm busy as it is. And I said, but I could help somebody move through a period of fear, or a period of challenge of some kind. So I love that. So just take your piece of the red thread. Okay, so gate 18, personality, earth, yes. I've been a perfectionist, fear of failure. So I've asked, why do, this goes along with gate 48, that I will never know enough to act. I see these pattern gate 32 in design Mars, so I realize that this Spleen Center is a big part of my growth. Yeah. So Carolyn, I would just say, yeah, I mean, it's really helpful to identify our fears, like my fear of not knowing enough, my fear that it's not going to be good enough, and be able to pull your energy out of them. Like, pull your energy out. When you believe them and you get emotionally involved in them, then they colonize your mind. Okay. They really colonize your mind, and you're kind of in trouble at that point. Okay. It doesn't mean you can't get out, because, obviously everything moves, but it's when you notice that thought of, well, I don't know enough about that. How can I even do that? You go, oh, wait, there's that thought again, right? I'm not going to be emotionally involved in it. I'm going to pull my energy out of it, and I'm going to let that thought just keep on going. Keep on going. And there are some, like I said, with fears of the past or something, if they're connected to trauma, like this trauma is like it's like a magnet, right? And it will suck your energy into it. And so you need to be able to heal the trauma so that you can be more free. But many times it's just an old program, it's something somebody told you at some point. It's a decision that you made because somebody yelled at you when you were a teenager, whatever, right? Or you made a mistake, or you did poorly on a test or something at some point, and then you made that mean that you're never going to know enough about something, right? So it's like, just know that you can move through these, because they tend to be instinctual fears that are not related to real world, current situations. Okay. Megumi says, open spleen, and I have all defined gates except the 57 and 50. So I have a fear from the sound of small airplanes recently. That sound reminds me of World War II. I am from Japan, and I believe my grandparents' generation's experience and memories caused me this fear. That's really interesting. It could be in your epigenetics. And so the 44 is the fear of the past. And so can you tell me, Megumi, if is your 44 red or black in your chart? Because if it's red, that means it's in your epigenetics, and it definitely can be coming from your red. Yeah, that's what I thought. So that definitely can be coming from your from that ancestry. So if you have a situation like that, use like this technique that that I said with the, you know, the hands in the armpits and then pushing down on your hands and breathing, and just be like, oh wow, there's that fear, and just move the energy of it. Just move that energy, and don't go ahead. Don't believe it, right? Because the truth is, you're not in World War II, right? And they may have been in danger, right? Okay, they may very well have been in danger, but you're not right now. Not that kind of danger. So just remind yourself of that. So we're coming up on our last couple minutes here. Just go ahead and pop any other questions that you have in the chat. And okay, so what if a channel is striped red and black? So what that means is that the it means that more than one, let's see, it means that a planet or more than one planet are in the same gate more than once. So, you know, like this happens sometimes like with Pluto or Uranus or Saturn, because they're the slower moving planets. And so sometimes they're, the red and the black comes from where the planets were when you were born, 80, and the red is 88 days prior to your birth. Okay, so it's almost 3 months. And so was the planet, you know, like was Pluto in the same gate, right? 3 months apart. Fairly common. I see that in charts all the time. But then sometimes you'll have like Mercury and your Earth are both in the same gate. Okay. And that can be either, it could be either red or black, but it's for sure, if you have red and black, it means that the two, you know, either the same planet or more than one planet were in that same gate. Yeah, I think that was clear. Okay. All right. Last call for questions. Excellent thought to pull the energy out of fear. Love the hands under the armpits. Felt like giving myself a hug. It feels really good. Yeah, it does something, like it connects to a nerve. I think it might connect to the vagus nerve, and it just feels really nurturing. Thank you for another awesome session today. Thank you, Carolyn. Okay, thanks for your help. Thanks. Have to hop off now. Okay. Yep, we're gonna all hop off. All right. Many blessings, much love. And like I said, you know, reach out to me if you are interested in having a reading, or you want to join the membership site. You can just do that with the URL. Oh, I'll put that in the comments for the Facebook Live also, or if you're interested in a small coaching package. All right, many blessings, much love. Bye for now.